Introduction. My name is Caballero. I'm a Mexican-American poet from Round Rock, Pflugerville, Texas. I went to Gaddis Elementary, went to Ridgeview, then I moved to Pflugerville, went to Hendrickson, and then I went to UT. Graduated last May, and I'm a law student in Houston, Texas, and I just finished my first year. And thank you very much. And I've been writing, performing, teaching, loving poetry. Okay, so the first time I actually performed, I was 13 years old, but I don't talk about that. 17 is when I really got into it. I got involved through the local poetry organization here in Austin called They Speak Youth Poetry Slam. They're a nonprofit. They've been around for 16 years. They have writing workshops, they do poetry slams, they do open mics. Once again, the name is They Speak Youth Poetry Slam. And while at UT, I co-founded a poetry organization, Spitshine Poetry. We are the only spoken word slam poetry organization at the University of Texas. And last year, we won the National College Poetry Slam Championship. So I say all that to say that this world we're in, this immediate community you have, there is an infrastructure in place for creativity for young writers. There is a community of poets and people in this city who are dedicated to the craft of poetry, to the craft of engaging youth voices. So I started really teaching actively at City Folks Middle School. I went there first for like 4 months, and I moved to Ridgeview. But one of the teachers there went to school with their son, Chris Clement, and Mrs. Clement, and she asked me to come read some poems to her students because she knew that I read poems. And I was like, okay, I'm 19 years old, but I believe in poetry. And so I went there I think it was the last day of school, my freshman year at UT. And I had a room very much like this full of 6th graders who were like, what are we here for? And I stepped up and I read some poems. And the look on their faces, much on the look on your faces now, or what really inspires me, because poetry, at the end of the day, it's a contact sport. It engages you in a way that you really weren't ready for. And that's why I lead to expectation. As writers, and as students, and as teachers, creativity in writing, there's a constant need for expectation, right? We want to know where the writing is going. We want to know where our lessons are going. We want to know if our students' creative conduits are leading to where we want them to lead. However, oftentimes that type of expectation is ultimately a distraction. And I say that because growing up in the school system and trying to bridge myself as an independent, outside of school writer, poet, creative artist, and a student in school, I found I was fortunate to have English teachers who facilitated my voice. But that facilitation could only exist if I knew that they were with me, if I knew that I could write something freely, if I had the freedom to express, if I had the freedom to say something that was true to me, whether it be in a creative assignment, whether it be in an essay analyzing Slaughterhouse-5, whether it be something of the like. I needed to feel as if I had permission. And so that's where I lead to this idea of creating permission in the classroom. Creating permission, at the end of the day, is not necessarily the same thing as writing something on the board and saying, students, today we're going to work on metaphor. And the students are like, what? You know, that's something that happens a lot. I see in classrooms, like there's a lesson, there's a plan, and then there's an attack mode for teachers. Like, all right, listen, we're going to talk about bananas as hearts. What? The students are like, what does that even mean? But at the end of the day, but they don't know yet, because in their heads, in their minds, and in their souls, poetry, creative expression is oftentimes in an academic atmosphere measured quantitatively. It's measured not necessarily on a spectrum, but in black and white terms. One of the biggest questions I get from students, and I'm sure you all do too, is this good? And that question itself is the problem, because it reflects an already met conclusion in their minds, as if, oh, I had to put something on paper in the school classroom for my teacher, and my ultimate concern is not whether it's an expression of me, not whether it's something that I truly want to say, not, hey, do you like the images I used? Hey, do you like the words I used? No, it's, is this good? And so as teachers and as writers, we are our own worst critics. it's inevitable. Humans are fallible, and teachers, we're in this constant space. You all are in this constant space of checking and redirecting and trying to rearrange students and noise and activity. And in that kind of necessary structure, students lose that freedom. They're distracted by expectation. They think a poem has to arrive a certain way. They think a poem has to look a certain way. And in that mode of thinking, you've already lost. You've already lost if you have a 4-week unit, a 6-week unit, STAR testing coming up, and your students are supposed to discuss personal narrative, and the only thing that they can judge their writing by is good or bad. And when you have that in the classroom, you're already working uphill. And then when you have students who say, I don't know what to write, or I have nothing to say, you have to, instead of getting perhaps frustrated or angry, you have to embrace creative resistance, because it's not their fault. It's not these students' fault that they don't want to throw themselves into the writing process, because oftentimes writing is mechanical. It's, okay, we're going to have a brainstorm session, okay? All right, we're going to gather some thoughts and ideas for a larger story. We have a body of work we want to create. We have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an end. And this isn't just necessarily poetry. This can be writing essays, this can be short stories, flash fiction, any mode of creative expression. There is, at the end of the day, some formula. Poetry, it lends itself to form in a lot of different ways. An example of form that I like to use a lot is an ode. Odes are tiny little pockets of celebration in poetry. You know, it's finding something that's so minute in its perhaps ordinariness, like a mango or a plum or the trees outside or your cell phone. It's any kind of small object, and it's recreating its purpose. It's repurposing characterization. It's repurposing imagery. It's repurposing everything. That's what an ode is. And so oftentimes I tell my students, okay, what do you love? And of course it's like Xbox, Netflix, my phone, Wi-Fi. And I'm just like, okay, non-technological, what do you like? And then someone will say, my mom's cooking. I'm like, all right, hold that right there. Mom's cooking. What does your mom cook? Oh, she cooks the best XYZ. Hold that right there. I have the classroom just suspended in disbelief, or belief rather. And I go, what does your mom cook? And they go, well, she's really good at cooking this. I'm like, all right. And so I create a tiny poem in the air. I'm like, all right, we have our mom's cooking. What are the feelings you get when you know you're walking into a room and your mother is cooking for you, and the food is going to be hot and put in front of you? What happens when you have a large family? What happens when you don't always have food on the table? Because oftentimes we don't know our students' brains like that, because our students, they never want to fully insert themselves into the writing. Because like I said, it's mechanical. It's, oh, this is a pre-designed, presupposed process, and that itself is counterintuitive to creative expression. There has to be a carefree inventiveness in the room. And I know classroom equilibrium is necessary. There has to be some type of control. And I've found that in teaching creative writing and trying to get students to really not just think about the assignment, but think about how they want to project their voice into the assignment, there has to be a little loosening of the reins. There can't always be that need to correct, that need to say, oh, this needs to be a certain way. Because at the end of the day, they've already thought that. They have arrived to school with that thought in their head. They've arrived to they're sitting in front of you while you're explaining the lesson, and they're already shut off. And a lot of that has to do with the idea that poetry, either how it looks or how it sounds, it has to rhyme. It has to talk about certain things, or especially for young boys, poetry's for girls, or poetry's not cool, like what? And it's all peer-based, right? So a majority of the students that I work with range primarily middle schoolers, 6th to 8th graders. I've taught a few workshops and classes with younger students. And what I find with, students kindergarten to 5th, 4th grade is that carefree inventiveness is a part of their personality. That need to say why or just ask the most random questions in that speech, in that mode of speech, you find a medium for creativity. What they're saying, how they're asking questions, if they put that on a piece of paper and they broke it up into 12 different lines, all the questions they ask in a day, well then, right there you have a poem. And that's a lesson that I did actually. I did something more questions than answers, or questions that don't have answers. And that was just a simple warm-up prompt that actually led into a main writing workshop. I was like, all right, today you're going to ask questions you do not know the answer to. If you know the answers to the question you are about to write, you will not write it. That was my only rule. I said, if you can answer the question, legitimately answer the question, then you can't put it down. And so, you have the idea of, what if music never existed? That's a line somebody wrote. Or, what if my mother didn't love me? Or what if I never came to school again? And you get one or two questions like that, and sometimes those moments of honesty, you find there's just a tiny crevice of opportunity. And it's difficult in a classroom. You're trying to manage 20, 30 students, 4 or 5 different classes, or you're trying to kind of concentrate their concentration. You're trying to have everybody here, just right here, just long enough to get the inertia of creativity going. But the problem is that they think the finished product can only exist on a page. They think that the permission, which opens up the process, has one ultimate goal, which is oftentimes a graded assignment or a standardized test or some other complex labyrinth of already standardized expectation. And what I bring to the classroom, beneficial for my pedagogy, is that I'm a performer. I perform poetry. I teach spoken word. I incorporate sound and rhythm and musical elements into every lesson. So, and the thing to do that, the way that I do that is I'll pass around the poem, and I'll have everybody read either one line, or I'll have a table read a line together. It's almost like a chorus of voices. So can you imagine having a Maya Angelou poem in front of all your students, which is something I did, and there's just an echo of voices saying, and still I rise, and still I rise, and still I rise, and still I rise. But you hear that from 4 12-year-olds who have no idea what it means yet. And they feel like as if there's a community of voices. And that's what your classroom ultimately has to be, a community of voices. If you have disconnected, discombobulated voice and there's no continuity and expression, just overall, then where can we find consistency in our lessons? Because a lot of things I try out, it just doesn't work. I'm like, all right, check that, no, move along. And that's okay, trial by fire or trial by arrow, however it works. There's no real answer. Every classroom I go into, I write 3 rules before I even speak to the students. I walk on the board and I write 3 rules down for the class. Like, these are definitive constitutional classroom laws. And I say, 1, there are no rules when it comes to creative writing. And I say, 2, fear nothing about language. Fear nothing in language. Or words. Don't fear words. And 3, take risks. Those are my 3 rules. So I say there are no rules when it comes to creative expression. Because a lot of times, if I say there are no rules when it comes to poetry, everyone's like, poetry. But if I say creative expression, they're like, okay, I can express myself creatively. And then I say write a poem, and they're like, you get them tricked. Sometimes students need to be tricked, and that's okay. It's for their own good. But when I do that, when I automatically kind of remove the idea of expectation, remove the idea that I need you, person, student, living being with complex thoughts and emotions, I need you to sound a certain way. I need your voice to be sculpted a certain way. But when I put those rules up on the board, I kind of recreate that idea for them, because they see me. I have the benefit of coming in as almost like a partner. So I work for Writers in the Schools in Houston, Texas. They're a nonprofit. They serve 26,000 students in the greater Houston area, and they place writers in grades from kindergarten to high school. And so I'm entering a classroom. Teachers are opening up their space to me every week, so I can come in and take some of y'all's precious time. And so, and in that, I want to be proactive with how I engage students, and I want to be cultivating curiosity at all times. Because I'm only there for such a finite period, but I have a lot to say, and I know they do too. But if I come in and they think that I want something out of them, then they're already checked out. Especially the students that I work with are a lot of young minority students, a lot of Latino, Hispanic, African American students. And in those cultures, in those spaces that they're used to, and oftentimes for children in general, particularly minority students, there is a displacement of attention. There is either institutional, not necessarily educational, but in the world around them, there's a suppression of their voice. There's a suppression of that story. There's a displacement of attention in that where they see that they fit in those crevices of the world, they often feel like they don't. And then when we have, let's say, a course or English classroom or a reading list where we have stories and we have writers who don't look anything like them, who don't have stories that resonate with their childhood, with their history, then where's your hook? Where's your hook for your students to engage? In the text, in the source material, whatever it may be. And so by kind of long-term planning, there has to be a subtle but very proactive approach in letting your students know that though there is an infrastructure in the classroom and there are rules with how we operate within this classroom, when we're entering into this space of expression, when we're entering into this space of intimate and oftentimes raw emotion storytelling, it's no longer our job to critique or criticize. It's our job to hold their hand. You learn by doing. You explore by trying. And trying and mere effort doesn't just come with, okay, all right, class, we have to do this today. And then fly, little birdies. Some lessons will work like that. And that's good. That means your students are present. That means they're there, they're collected. But oftentimes, there has to be a little bit more effort from our part, on the other, sitting up in front of the classroom. Because if I'm already giving the lesson, I want you to feel like it's fun. I want my students to feel like, okay, I really don't know what to expect, so I don't really know how to judge myself already. And that's the good thing. So when I bring in slam poetry, and I'm going to perform a poem here in a little bit, just to give you some context. When I bring in poetry or slam poetry, and it's a day. As I say, we're going to watch poems today, but not just watch as in, watching a music video. We're going to critically listen, because oftentimes when we want to analyze a poem, we want to pull details, pull diction, pull syntax, pull some seemingly analytical body of work. Oftentimes, looking at a poem written by Robert Frost won't do the trick. I love Robert Frost. 12-year-old kids whose minds can be quick, go everywhere, 11-year-olds or 10-year-olds or 9-year-olds might not have that same initial investment. And so you have to let them know that poetry is cool, because it is. And online, I've found a lot of success in using YouTube Poetry Slam channels that have classroom playlists already created. And there are two to check out. Button Poetry, like Button, B-U-T-T-O-N Poetry. They are the largest Poetry Slam network provider. Anybody ever seen like Huffington Post, Upworthy, let's say like post poetry, like slams or post poems online, like HuffPost does it. Like there's a bunch of websites that kind of pool slam poetry videos, and it's Button Poetry is the largest slam poetry provider. There's another one in Houston, Texas called Right About Now Poetry. W-R-I? No, it's W-R-I, yeah, it's a nice little pun. And that's the poetry venue that I visit every Wednesday. Right About Now, write the verb right.
Am I doing that? Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks. The verb, R-I-T-E, but it's okay, we'll fix it.
Yeah, I'm like, this is not.
And so, and these are, and so.
W-R-I-T. I'm like, why did I hear a G in there? I'm like, this is why, okay. All right.
And so Button Poetry, Right About Now Poetry, both of these Poetry Slam channels, they have playlists, they have poems that will just rock your students' world and rock your world. Because you're hearing poems, they essentially, these organizations, they travel around different poetry slams and competitions and events across the nation. So you're not just getting poets in one community, you're getting quite literally a nation of voices, and these are typically national competitions where the poets are talented, and the presentation itself is the selling point. because most students have very little experience actually observing someone getting on a stage and then performing a poem, because that in itself seems, in a word to them, silly. Like, wait, I'm gonna get up and say a poem out loud? You know, that's the first thing I tell my students, like, all right, when I'm going over the rules and classroom expectations, I go, like, listen, at the end of our time together, every single person in this room will read a poem out loud in front of their class. And the collective sigh alone just could have sucked the air out of the room. What? Mister, do we have to read a poem? Do we have to read a poem? And there's that automatic resistance of something they have no idea. But in that is opportunity. In that is a chance to redirect that expectation, to redirect. And so using slam poetry, we sat down, I had them listen, and I had a questionnaire in front of them. So I had a piece of paper like an assignment, and I had 3 or 4 questions. I go, have you ever heard poetry before? And see what they thought. Like, just see, like, you know, what they thought about hearing, sound, sonic qualities of poetry. And then I think my second question was, what were your reactions after watching the poems? And I just had them like bullet point these answers, you know. And the third one is, why do you think it's important to read poems out loud? And does that make a difference? And the responses I got were overwhelming. I was floored by how quickly a lot of their already predetermined met minds changed. Every year for Writers in the Schools, we have to create an anthology for our students. This is, I have 2 copies. One is for Group A, one's Group B. I'm going to pass one around so y'all can just look at it. And these are also other anthologies that of my students that we've worked on. The 2 white ones are from C.D. Folks, and then the blue one is from the creative writing camp that we worked in. And the back of the green one is, at the very back, is their answers. So I had the questionnaire, and I asked them, why do you think it's important to read, write, or perform poems? Does it make a difference? I have a few responses.
You want to show them right here? You can.
Here we go. Why do you think it's important to read, write, or perform poems? Does it make a difference? And a lot of these I pulled excerpts from. Some of them were long, or just some of them just said, wow, I can't even talk right now. There's like, OMG. There was a lot of shorthand text in my responses, but in a good way. Because you can actually feel or see how they feel. When you express yourself, you're expressing to the world. I think it's important for people who want to tell their story or convey their message to be able to tell people about their emotions. I think it does make a difference because people believe you and share your feeling, understand what you're writing about. In your head, it sounds pale, but out loud, it's strong, inspirational. These responses are poems in themselves. No, exactly. Yes, they have a fierce, fearless feel, even if you're not loud. And these are for your students who are so afraid to speak, who are brilliant, creative, and listen well, but just when it comes to actually using their voice, it's scary. And when we can use poems, when you can show this kind of fearlessness that exists from poets who look like them, poets who share their stories, it's priceless. There's a bridge. You have them. They're saying, wow, my teacher is actually actively trying to connect with me beyond an academic approach. There's an emotional, personal, intimate level. Reading and performing poems is an important thing because it gives you a way to express yourself. Saying poems out loud gives you a real feeling for the gist of it. And I like that. I think that's thematic. Saying poems out loud gives you a feeling for the gist of it. Because there is no right or wrong, and there is no end game to teaching writing. There's no end game to self-improvement when it comes to trying to cultivate our voice. I mean, I'm still trying to cultivate mine. We're all trying to cultivate our own. Even as writers, sometimes we feel like what we're saying, what we're not saying rather, is hovering over us. And for students, they don't know how to filter what's important and what's not important because a lot of times they just check it all off. And so when you can show them that it is important and it does make a difference. So building that atmosphere of creativity and fearlessness, I asked, again, my students at the end of the year, my last day, I was like, I want you to just tell me how you felt, good and bad, how you felt after our year together. Some of them were very eccentric and expressive, and I enjoyed that thoroughly. Poetry is writing anything that expresses your thoughts and feelings, told in your own rhythm and speed. Poetry just expresses you. It's anything you want. No right or way wrong to write it. I didn't do the capitalizations, they did. Poetry can be delivered on stage. Poets memorize their poems. Poets perform their poems with passion and all kinds of emotion. Poets could have different textures. Poets create magical words and then perform them for everyone. Poets can write anything. Some poets wear tattoos. Some poets that we watched did have tattoos. Poetry is fun. Yes, right? Yes. And shows emotion. It tells a story. There are a billion ways to write a poem. I noticed that poets speak with more enthusiasm. I now know that poems don't have to rhyme, and it's okay to say what you want. Well, poetry, this is the realest one. Well, poetry, it's not that bad. Because it's basically an imagination dump where there are no rules. You can talk about anything. My thoughts have changed. I feel like poetry is a writing that you can express yourself about whatever we want. And then poetry is hard, but poetry is interesting. And I can say what I want. It doesn't have to rhyme. Poetry is cool. Poetry doesn't have to be happy. And then this one, it's two separate ones, but I write right here. This is from a student, Maddie. All year, Maddie was the first one to be, I don't want to read the poem. I can't read it. She really enjoyed fan fiction writing. So her modus operandi was always recreating worlds that were already created. So she's like, I live in the shadows. I can't get on stage and read a poem. And I didn't put their quotes because their names behind their quotes, so I knew they didn't want to let their peers know that they thought that poetry was cool. But eventually they all did. I write a whole lot better now. I'm not shy to read in front of a class anymore. Poems helped my life because I can read and write a lot better now. When you have that constant effort of telling your students that they matter, not in the sense like, oh, you're important, but your story, your voice, the things that you have to say, it matters. And while we may not be able to dedicate hours upon hours, while we have to operate in a vacuum of expectations from our bosses, from our school, from test scores, while we're trying to organize and plan and be mom and dad and the socialist worker and the teacher and the cafeteria lady and doing everything at once, it's imperative that we try. It's imperative. It can't be secondhand. It can't be, you can't let them know that you're not believing it in them. Because if you expect students to believe in themselves, then you have to be just as forthright. You have to insert yourself so they can see that they can extend their own selves into the poem, into the activity, into the long term. And a lot of that just all has to do with mentality. There are resources upon resources upon resources for writing prompts, for poems, for things that move you, for things that can move your students. But if you're not kind of extracting the magic from what you're doing, if we can only present the information in a task-oriented fashion, then that freedom, that carefree inventiveness, that idea of creating permission, you're lost because they don't see an entry point for the writing process. They don't see in this classroom, in this space that we're in, how can I actually do what you're telling me to do? Because all I've ever known was silence in some way or the other. And so introducing poetry, introducing it as this, not this finite kind of expectation, you have to sound a certain way, be good or bad. We have to do away with that. We have to just kick it out the door and say, peace. Don't need you anymore. Because there's a new way. And it's by this proactive insertion and immersion into belief of what poetry, what creative writing can do, not only for you, us as writers, us as teachers, but for your students as well. And when you can bridge that, oftentimes I too find myself stuck in articulating how I feel and trying to make sense of the world around me or trying to just express my daily emotions. And so when my students will say, I don't know what to write or I have nothing to say, oftentimes I don't get angry. I don't say, no, you do, write something. I get down on one knee. I'm like, what's the problem? What do you mean you can't write? What's in your head right now? And they're not expecting that. They want me to walk away so 5 more minutes can pass without them having to write. And I'm looking at them in their face and I'm asking them, can you tell me how your day was yesterday? I'm trying to pull something, pull an emotion, pull a detail. Oh, I went to the beach yesterday. Have you been to the beach? I have never been to the beach. So it was the first time your toes touched sand. They're like, yeah. And I was like, write me a poem. And I walk away. And while it's difficult to do that to 30 students at once, when you have the opportunity, you have to take it. Because for students, for young children, no matter the age range, when we're in our head, when we're stuck in our head, it's very easy to just dismiss everything, retreat inside, especially when the activity itself is to break out of your shell, to break out. And so when that kind of attention is given, and even in the most quick way, when you just continually ask questions and try to create a conversation within them, then in that exchange, it's almost like you've invited them. You've told them, hey, you have permission to write whatever you want to write. And now me, as your authority, as your teacher, as your friend, I'm giving you an invitation to arrive at this point. And that point can be writing a haiku for the day. It can be writing an ode. It can be writing a personal narrative. Whatever it may be, at the end of the day, they have to feel like that when they finish writing, they want to share it with you. And they don't want to just avoid the finish line. We have to encourage that journey to the finish line, whether it be a haiku, 17 syllables, whether it be an essay, whether it be a personal narrative, expository writing, whether it be all these things. You have to be alongside with them, and not necessarily always holding their hand, but saying you have the freedom to go forth in this creative atmosphere, because only you can tell your story. Nobody else can tell your story. Where are you from? How many brothers you have? Where's your mom? Where's your dad? Where are you born? What their life is like, how their lives go through, you'd be astounded. And that's why I pass around some of the poems, some of the anthology, some of the emotion that's very real, but very hidden. Even for second, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, sixth graders, there is a tendency to suppress. There's a lot of perhaps cultural cues that cause that, but when we know the problem as teachers, we can no longer be a part of it. I think that's true in life. You can recognize the problem, you can recognize the issue, and you have to detach your association and say, all right, I'm not going to complain about this problem. I'm going to be working towards a solution. But I say working because it's a present verb. It's constant work. You're constantly working towards that solution with your students. And once they feel that you as your teacher, when you're standing up here, that you literally are saying this space is yours to reclaim. This activity, this lesson, this unit is yours. I'm trying to facilitate a community of voices. You are my community. It takes a village at the end of the day. And it takes a village, and once you have that initial foundation, you'd be astounded at how quick they respond to simple activities. One of the writing summer camps I taught at, I oftentimes, to disguise the idea of brainstorming, I often introduced a warm-up before we started our main workshop prompt. Warm-up is a great trick word. We got to warm up today, but really we're going to brainstorm. We're going to work on cultivating ideas before we enter the main writing process. But they don't know that. I just think, all right, this is the prompt I did for brainstorming. I brought in, I took constitutional law this past semester, so I just read the Declaration of Independence, and I was like, there's some beautiful language in here. But primarily, I hold these truths to be self-evident. just that sentence alone is so profound. And I didn't even use historical context. I was like, y'all have all read the Declaration of Independence? You've seen National Treasure? You know what the words say. So I brought up, I hold these truths to be self-evident, wrote them in big red letters on the smartboard. And I said, go. And of course they go, whoa, what do you mean go? And I was like, all right, who doesn't know what self-evident means? And that was my trick. I wanted them to ask me the question, oh, and like, what is self-evident? I was like, well, what is self? Self? Me, okay. I was like, what is evident? Like evidence? I was like, well, what is evidence? Well, it proves something. I'm like, oh, so the self proves something, huh? And they were like, yeah. And then I gave them the actual definition. They're like, oh, we almost got it. But they were there. They worked, they broke down something as part of the problem before they even got started. Because they were curious. They were like, what? We're doing a warm up, I hold these truths to be self-evident? What is this about? And then some of the poems that they read, I was just like it was great. Like the things they just listed, it wasn't even the poem form. That was the warm up. I was generating imagery, generating a word bank, generating a think bank for them, saying, hey, because when we transition into the activity, we're already in the middle of it, because we had just spent all this time generating ideas, generating little themes. I hold these truths to be self-evident. Pizza is delicious, or my mother is my favorite, or you have a spectrum of these things, and some of them are comical, some of them are serious, some of them are like just in the middle. You're like, all right, I like that, that's good, go for that. But that little thing right there, that little warm-up, 10, 15 minutes, that became a catalyst for their intrigue. They're like, oh, I'm already in the game. Now I might as well finish. I might as well go through every step. And so I was just, at that point, I was just guiding them. I wasn't even telling them what to do. I was just saying, oh, what you got there? I like that. What you got there? I really like that. And then I'd say, all right, share your warm-up with just your partner. Just share, just read it out loud in a quick little intimate back and forth. Because I got them at the same time where they're generating images, thinking about what we're going to write, they're also communicating with that. They're communicating that with their peers, and in a way, they're also editing. They're self-editing, because they read something out loud and like, oh wait, that sounds bad, I want to rewrite that. And they're doing that on their own. They're instinctively revising the moment it leaves their mouth. Because oral tradition, spoken word, I mean, that predates language. We were speaking things before we were writing things. It's so easy and natural for us to communicate that way, but whenever you bridge that with the creative writing process, or even the warm-up to that, students start to see the significance in it. And you can see the significance by saying, when you read something out loud, are you running out of breath? Probably should put a comma somewhere, huh? Right? Or are you too excited? Okay, maybe we should remove an exclamation point. Or maybe you want to impress more meaning upon a single word. Or perhaps you should have alliteration to help the letters string together the meaning. And I found that type of approach more effective than saying, all right, class, today we're going to learn about alliteration, imagery, diction, and detail. I just listed like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for most students, right? They're like, what? What? Like they're already processing in their mind how not to do it. And you can't have, in a classroom where you're trying to facilitate openness, we can't have these activities or these things that kind of switch it off. We have to have almost like a dimmer instead, like just to bring the lights down a little bit. As opposed, all right, you guys aren't too sure about this. Well, let's walk through it. What are you unsure about? Because there's no rules in creativity, right? Right. All right. So what's the problem? Well, I guess and then we get to it, and then we say, all right, once we address that, we can move forward. But that only happens if we're proactively paying attention and cultivating that curiosity, even just from the warm-up, all the way through. Because you can get one good day of writing, and that one good day of writing can transform everything. And I'll tell you why. When I was in 7th grade, Ridgeview, I had a teacher. His name was Mr. Malcolm, Matt Malcolm. And we had an assignment. We had just read The Outsiders. And he asked us to write a poem based off our lives. And I couldn't tell you what the poem was about, but when I wrote it to myself, and I legitimately thought, I was like, this is not horrible. I'm 12 years old and I really have no prior experience with actually writing. And I go and I show it to my teacher. I kind of like walk quietly over to his desk. Mr. Malcolm, can you read this poem? And I go sit back down. And just like threw a grenade. And he comes back to me and he sits and he kneels down. He goes, "This is a good poem. I see you in this poem. Don't stop writing." And he put the poem on the whiteboard, and then it was stolen the next day. So I think that's a good thing. And that was 11 years ago. I'm 23. And I have been in this world of language and words and poetry writing from that one. I mean, there are things that pushed me along, of course, but it started there. It started in the classroom with one teacher kneeling down to say, "Hey, what you did," he didn't analyze it, he didn't take a pen to it, he just said, "This is a good poem. Don't stop doing this." And I'm here today. So that being said, I'm going to perform a poem for you all. To be a Mexican man in Texas is to be confused for construction, for clear glass windows to custodial caregivers to those who don't care, to take up my trash, just not my tax dollars, to I like your food, just not you. To be a Mexican man in Texas is to have your skin swallow the sun. To sweat, it is to sway. To sway is to invite the light, and to invite the light is to be thankful for all the sun has done. For the last few years, more people in America have eaten more tortillas than they have bread. So I suppose the best thing since sliced bread is a tortilla instead. Ah, if only America loved my skin as much as it did the food that Texas would use to be Mexican. Okay, Tex-Mex, it really is not Mexican food. Taco Bell is not really food, it is a perversion. A version of Mexico we can all get used to. Yes, we all love margaritas. Yes, we love queso. Yes, we love guacamole. Yes, we love a culture we can consume until there's no longer room in our stomachs. But just last September, 43 Mexican students disappear. Where do 43 bodies go? Do you still have room in your stomachs? To be a Mexican man in Texas is to be me. It is to have a whole plate of lonely to yourself. My reflection is a box of leftovers, who I'm supposed to be, who I am. I am a Mexican man. I come from Mexican men whose hands kiss bricks into buildings, whose hands kiss their wives like kneaded dough, whose hands kiss nothing into legacy. See, 2 generations back, Spanish was all my family spoke. 1 generation back, English broke through the mouth of my mother, became the only map my tongue would ever know. So when asked if I speak Spanish, it is mostly by white people, and I am still a little bit astonished at the question, as if I had to audition for my own skin, as if I needed to speak for my blood to sing. See, English may have been the first seed to flower, but Spanish is still the soil. Language, like love, is a lesson we never stop learning from. So for those of you who say you want to be Mexican like me, I wish I could believe you. I wish identity was such an easy trajectory, something I could pick up and then lay at your feet. But when I was 13, 2 cops thought I was a crime in progress, put their hands on me hot like an iron, trying to remove all my wrinkles. I can still feel my insides crease at the heat. Do you still want to be Mexican like me, or do you just want the food? I don't mean to be rude, but you can't pronounce the food you are ordering. Yes, you love tacos, but what about the hands that make them? Yes, you love your houses and your highways and your homes. What about the hands that make them? Don't you get it? My blood, it is a song. Mariachis remind me of my grandfathers. They both built a house and a family without ever going to college. My grandpa Caballero, he built houses and he picked guitar strings. My grandpa Perales, he picked cotton in my grandmother's wedding ring. They are Mexican men. I am a Mexican man. I eat more tortillas than bread. Thank you, thank you. And I have one more. And so April is, I don't know if you know, it's National Poetry Month. And every April there's a National Poetry Foundation, and they have a challenge. It's called 30 for 30 Challenge, where poets, writers, really anybody who wants to step up to the plate can choose and attempt to write one poem every day in April. It's called 30 for 30. In the last 2 years, I've done it. It's been very difficult. It requires constant attention and practice, but you know, it really is. When it's May 1st, and you can look back and say, I have 30 poems. It's a wonderful feeling. And for teaching, the month of April, it's great. There's things like National Poem in Your Pocket Day, where you can pick a poem, or you can decide select a poem, and you carry it around your pocket all day. And you ask people if they have poems in their pockets. And then you read your poems to each other, and there's like that swapping of storytelling. And April is just incredible. And so this past April, I was fortunate enough to be a featured poet at the Austin International Poetry Festival, which occurs every year in Austin. And I was very grateful to be there. And so this poem, and I have 2 short poems about poetry, Ars Poetica, as they say. And I'm sure you'll respond to this. This is my poem for the 17th day of April, and it's a brief, annotated list of the questions my students ask. Question: Mr. Zachary, is this poem good? Translation: last week, we learned what rejection meant. I do not like the definition of that word. Is there anything wrong with what I feel? Am I good enough? Nobody ever listens to what I have to say. Last week, we learned what worthy meant too. I want to mean worthy. Question: Mr. Zachary, does this poem have to rhyme? Translation: if there are rules, I don't want to break them. I just hate when language has expectation. I don't want to be expected. Question: Mr. Zachary, do I have to read this poem out loud? Translation: I've never trusted my mouth. Inside is a voice I'm afraid to let out. Who is going to listen to me? What do you mean the stage is mine? What do you mean I can command an audience just by speaking? Question: Mr. Zachary, what if we don't know what to write? Translation: how does anyone ever say what they mean? Self-expression is confusing. How can I matter just by saying so? If I have a story, you mean I have to write it? I don't want to say what I have to say. What do you mean someone is already listening? I don't think so. No one wants to know what's inside my head. And those are real questions, you know? And this is the last poem I'll read, and it's from the Austin International Poetry Festival. I got to meet Nikki Giovanni, and I got to have dinner with her, and I got to listen to her speak and read poetry, and that experience just kind of compounded my heart. I call myself a lot of times an emotional noodle, because poetry and things just kind of just boil my heart, and I'm just emotional noodle, and that's okay. I'm al dente spiritually. It's all good. So this last poem is called The Last Word in the Room, and it's kind of a reflection on my journey as a writer, person, same thing. You read a poem, and a woman says, "Thank you." You finish your set, covered in sweat, and a man praises the rhythm in your voice, says he could hear the movement and feel the intention, says he could see the craft behind all this excavation, assures me that someone is always paying attention. A mother comes to you. Her voice is quiet but nurturing. She tells you about the sweet sensitivity between each word you said, how when you said how you felt, beauty was all she could see, and you are buried by the sincerity. Before you, an audience who has come to hear the stories you have to tell. Someone asks to buy your poem, but none of this has ever been for profit. You were 16 and sad, and a journal was all you had. You were 17 and sad, and a voice was all you had. You were 18 and sad, and language had one purpose: to fix. Then you step on a stage, and everyone knows your name. You can't keep your thoughts to yourself, and everyone still listens. How lucky are you? At this point, you are 23 and happy to announce, after the poems are read and the poets have left, and all the audience believes in poetry again, you still have to stop and breathe it all in. You still have to hug every poet because you cannot be here without them, because this is your community. And when will your life ever be this meaningful? Thank you.